on their outspread palms. Would his mistress, inquired Decimus, with a deep bow, desire her breakfast served here? Why not? Said Lucia absently. Decimus barked at the twins, and they made haste to prepare the table, while Lucia watched their graceful movements with amused curiosity, as if observing the antics of a pair of playful terriers. Pretty things they were, a little older than she, though not so tall, agile and shapely, and as nearly alike as two peas. It was the first time that Lucia had seen them in action, for they had been purchased only a week ago. Apparently Decimus, who had been training them, thought they were ready now for active duty. It would be interesting to see how they performed. For father said they had been brought up in a home of refinement and were probably having their first experience of serving at table. Without risking an inquiring glance at the young woman, who stood watching them, they proceeded swiftly but quietly with their task. They were both very white, observed Lucia, doubtless from confinement in some prison ship. One of her father's hobbies, and his chief extravagance, was the possession of valuable slaves. The Gallio family did not own very many, for father considered it a vulgar, dangerous, and ruinously expensive vanity to have swarms of them about with little to do but eat, sulk, and conspire. He selected his slaves with the same discriminating care that he exercised when purchasing beautiful statuary and other art objects. He had no interest in public sales. Upon the return of a military expedition from some civilized country, the commanding officers would notify a few of their well-to-do acquaintances that a limited number of high-grade captives were available, and father would go down the day before the sale and look them over, learn their history, sound them out. And if he found anything he wanted to add to his household staff, he would bid. He never told anyone in the family how much he had paid for their slaves, but it was generally felt that he had never practiced economy in acquiring such merchandise. Most of the people they knew were in a constant dither about their slaves, buying and selling and exchanging. It wasn't often that father disposed of one, and when, rarely, he had done so, it was because the slave had mistreated another over whom he had some small authority. They had lost an excellent cook that way about a year ago. Minna had grown crusty and cruel toward the kitchen crew, scolding them loudly and knocking them about. She had been warned a few times. Then, one day, Minna had slapped Tertia. Lucia wondered briefly where Minna was now. She certainly did know how to bake honey cakes. You had to say this for father, he was a good judge of people. Of course slaves weren't people exactly, but some of them were almost people. There was Demetrius, for example, who was at this moment marching through the colonnade with long, measured strides. Father had bought Demetrius 6 years ago and presented him to Marcellus on his 17th birthday. What a wonderful day that was, with all their good friends assembled in the forum to see Marcellus, clean-shaven for the first time in his life, step forward to receive his white toga. Cornelius Capito and father had made speeches, and then they had put the white toga on Marcellus. Lucia had been so proud and happy that her heart had pounded and her throat had hurt, though she was only 9 then, and couldn't know much about the ceremony, except that Marcellus was expected to act like a man now, though sometimes he forgot to, when Demetrius wasn't about. Lucia pursed her full lips and grinned as she thought of their relationship. Demetrius, 2 years older than Marcellus, always so seriously respectful, never relaxing for an instant from his position as a slave. Marcellus, stern and dignified, but occasionally forgetting to be the master and slipping absurdly into the role of intimate friend. Very funny it was sometimes. Lucia loved to watch them together at such moments. Of course she had about the same relation to Tertia, but that seemed different. Demetrius had come from Corinth, where his father, a wealthy ship-owner, had taken a too conspicuous part in defensive politics. Everything had happened at once in Demetrius's family. His father had been executed, his 2 elder brothers had been given to the new legate of Achaia, his patrician mother had committed suicide, and Demetrius, tall, handsome, athletic, had been brought to Rome under heavy guard, for he was not only valuable, but violent. Lucia remembered, a week before Marcellus's coming of age, she had heard father telling mother about his purchase of the Corinthian slave only an hour before. She had been much impressed, and a little frightened, too, "He will require careful handling for a while," Father was saying. "He has seen some rough treatment. His keeper told me I'd better sleep with a dagger under my pillow until the Corinthian cooled down. It seems he had badly beaten up one of his guards. Ordinarily, of course, they would have dealt with him briefly and decisively, but they were under orders to deliver him uninjured. They were quite relieved to get him off their hands."
"But is this not dangerous?" Mother had inquired anxiously. "What might he not do to our son?"
"That," Father had replied, "will be up to Marcellus. He will have to win the fellow's loyalty, and he can do it, I think. All that Demetrius needs is an assurance of fair play. He will not expect to be petted. He is a slave, and he knows it, and hates it. But he will respond to decent discipline." And then Father had gone on to say that he had paid the money and signed the documents. He had himself led Demetrius out of the narrow cell, and when they were in the open plaza, had unlocked his chains, very carefully, too, for his wrists were raw and bleeding. "Then I walked on ahead of him," Father had continued, without turning to see whether he was following me. Aulus had driven me down and was waiting in the chariot at the Appian Gate, a few yards away. I had planned to bring the Corinthian back with me, but as we neared the chariot I decided to give him instructions about how to reach our villa on foot.
"Alone?" Mother had exclaimed. "Was that not very risky?"
"Yes," Father had agreed, "but not quite so risky as to have brought him here as a shackled prisoner. He was free to run away. I wanted him to be in a position to decide whether he would rather take a chance with us than gamble on some other fate. I could see that my gesture of confidence had surprised and mellowed him a little. He said, in beautiful Greek, for he had been well educated, 'What shall I do, sir, when I arrive at your villa?' I told him to inquire for Marcellus, who would advise him. He nodded and stood fumbling with the rusty chains that I had loosened from his hands. 'Throw them away,' I said. Then I mounted the chariot and drove home."
"I wonder if you will ever see him again," Mother had said, and in answer to her question, Marcellus appeared in the doorway.
"A young Corinthian has arrived, master," said Marcellus. "A Corinthian himself. He says he belongs to us." "That is true," Father said, pleased with the news. "I brought him this morning. He will attend my son, though Marcellus is to know nothing of this for the present. Feed him well, and provide him with a bath and clean clothing. He has been imprisoned for a long time." "The Greek has already bathed, master," replied Marcellus. "Quite right," approved Father. "That was thoughtful of you." "I had not yet thought of it," admitted Marcellus. "I was in the sunken garden supervising the building of the new rose arbor when this Greek appeared. Having told me his name and that he belonged here, he caught sight of the pool."
"You mean," expostulated Mother, "that he dared to use our pool?"
"I am sorry," Marcellus replied. "It happened so quickly I was unable to thwart it. The Greek ran swiftly, tossing aside his garments, and dived in. I regret the incident. The pool will be drained immediately and thoroughly cleansed." "Very good, Marcellus," said Father. "And do not rebuke him, though he should be advised not to do that again." And Father had laughed after Marcellus had left the room.
Mother said, "The fellow should have known better than that."
"Doubtless he did," Father had replied, "but I cannot blame him. He must have been immensely dirty. The sight of that much water probably drove him temporarily insane."
One could be sure, reflected Lucia, that Marcellus hadn't been too hard on poor Demetrius, for from that day he had treated him as if he were his own son. Indeed, the attachment was so close that slaves more recently acquired often asked if Marcellus and Demetrius were not somehow related. Demetrius had reappeared from the house now, and was advancing over the tiled pavement on his way to the pergola. Lucia wondered what errand was bringing him. Presently he was standing before her, waiting for a signal to speak. "Yes, Demetrius," she drawled. "The Tribune," he announced with dignity, "presents his good wishes for his sister's health and happiness, and requests that he be permitted to join her at breakfast." Lucia brightened momentarily, then sobered and replied, "Inform your master."